Safar Sadek here. I had a brainstorm earlier in the morning about this MGTOW concept that I'm very thankful for, to say the least, because I consider the correct concept of MGTOW to be the life raft that a lot of us men needed in order to get off this sinking ship that was hit by feminist torpedoes. Okay? And so, but as I began about 8 years ago learning about the MGTOW concept, I heard this and I heard that, and the same information and knowledge was in circulation all over the internet. And because it was such a breath of fresh air from a failed marriage, as like with many other men, or failed relationships, what have you, it was something that filled the void that was caused by a term in the MGTOW community known as the red pill rage, coming to the knowledge of, that dealing with females as required by social standards is all total bullshit. Okay? And so when we all came to this realization, the rage that we felt is in meme for what Neo in the movie The Matrix franchise experienced when he was told the truth about reality that was sold to him and everybody else. And so, as of late, I've went back and I've reevaluated some of the terminology that exists in the MGTOW concept, and the terminology is more than you think it is. And the devil is in the details. So if you are like pretty much all the other men in the MGTOW phenomenon, and you're using sex as the reason for your MGTOW experience, then it was all for nothing. And I hate to be the one to tell you this, but seriously, it was all for naught. And I'm going to explain that as I get into this image that you see here on the screen. But before I do that, I'm gonna throw out just a few common, well-known terms among the MGTOW concept as it's known today. You have terms like, the first one I use, red pill, blue pill, hypergamy, misogyny, alpha male, and beta male. Now, these are by no means the only terms in the MGTOW phenomenon, just a few of the most popular. Okay, and so I'm going to define the alpha and the beta male, because MGTOW, as it's known and as it's presented to men today, is literally a distinction between alpha males and beta males, and it all revolves around sex. Okay? Now, a standard definition for alpha male is a high-value male that gets unlimited sex because he has a controlling and socially dominant personality. Now, some may want to argue with that, but I mean, that would be some's prerogative to do so. Beta males, by contrast, are common males that are somewhat inept in relationships with females because they aren't confident enough to be socially dominant, and therefore get limited sex or have to simp for sex. Okay? And so as MGTOW is commonly circulated throughout social media and whatnot, these two contrasts right here have hijacked and taken over this concept that had a totally different purpose. All right. And because sex was the focal viewpoint, then by default, these two definitions of alpha and beta males are fundamentally flawed. All right. Because if you're using sex to define the purpose of MGTOW, then this false contrast between the two alphas and betas are, really unnecessary. If you're making this all about getting sex, and you might as well be a pickup artist, okay? Or PUA, as it's known in the MGTOW terminology. Because you have what's known as a man on the right hand that's claiming to be socially dominant and controlling, and then you have a man on the left hand that's not so much as. But both are competing for the same thing, sex. All right? And so the alpha male is destined to fail. Look at this image you have here on your screen. Look at it closely. Remember I told you the devil is in the details. All right? If you look at this closely, the alpha male is destined to fail. Why? Because alpha means first. Now look between alpha and male here on your screenshot. What do you see? Hashtag number 1, simp. What am I getting at here? Well, by definition, alpha male, who was the first male? Adam, according to the scriptures. And if you know the story of Adam and Eve, at the end of it all, Adam simped out. It didn't necessarily have to, because he had everything going for him. He didn't have to simp out, and did. And so that nature, by default, is fundamentally flawed. And so when you use a contrast between alpha and beta males with sex being the prime motivator, then this version of MGTOW is useless. Totally useless. Because you've taken sex, something that was created and designed as a tool of procreation between heterosexual couples, married couples, and you've taken that and made it into a recreational sort of thing, then this type of MGTOW, or this form of MGTOW that's commonly circulated, is fundamentally flawed. It's not going to work, because what's the end game of recreational sex? Look at society today. There's your answer. So this brand of MGTOW is just as self-destructive as the feminism that it's supposed to counter. All right? And I know this is probably another red pill experience for many of you hearing this, but it's the truth. Because the proof's in the pudding. What have you achieved by your ability to enjoy more recreational sex than other men? What's the end game? What sort of what sort of future have you created for yourself with this self-destructive type of thinking? I mean, really, really, do some deep soul searching and think deep within. Just because you can get more sex than another man by being what you consider controlling and socially dominant, well, women are naturally controlling and sexually dominant. So then what sets you apart from your counterpart, the beta male? By this definition, you're just a better beta male, to be honest with you. And so your alpha male bravado, by default, is destined to fail. Look at the yellow symbol there next to that, up the top right. You claim to be breaking off from tradition and going in your own direction or going your own way. But in reality, all you're doing is going full circle back to where you came from with a better way of obtaining sex, so to speak, than all the other men that are going down this same path that you consider beta males, sigma males, and all this other stuff. You just branched off for a little bit. You found out about women's nature and how they think and they operate long enough to get back on the same treadmill that you just got off of with this higher understanding of women for the simple purpose of gaining more sex from them than you were getting before. Because by your guys' definition, that's what this is all about, sex, okay? And not even the created, intended purposes of sex, but your recreational enjoyment of sex. Oh yeah. And so this whole idea, this infiltrated, hijacked version of MGTOW is just as self-destructive as the feminism that it claims to counter. So they both cancel each other out in the end. Nothing was achieved, okay? Nothing of any true value was achieved. And so if you look at the precept below that, Proverbs 26:11, as a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. But in this particular case, this fool has been more educated in his folly than the rest of the fools going down the same path. You're just better at it now and claiming to be more superior as a result of that. That's what this version of MGTOW is all about. It's this competition between a group of men that weren't getting any or hardly any sex. Now all of a sudden they're getting more sex than all the rest of them that aren't getting any or hardly any sex. So now they consider themselves the better man, the alpha male, not realizing that they're patterning themselves after the alpha male, Adam. And because you have within you DNA traits from the alpha male, you're going to repeat the same mistake that the alpha male repeated that got mankind in trouble in the first place, simping. So the very thing you claim to have overcome, you have once again become bondage to it with a supposed deeper understanding. Now, that's oxymoronic in and of itself, but that's what's being played these days, okay? But between the alpha and beta males, they have a hatred for the what's known as the omega male. The omega males in the MGTOW community are also known as MGTOW monks. They don't deal with women at all unless it's required for them to deal with them on a social or professional level, and that's even limited. These men are highly reclusive and they just don't deal with women at all. All right? And the alphas and the betas will have you believe that that's a no-no. But in reality, that's the true intended purposes of MGTOW. See, you other guys have missed the boat altogether. All right? You never went on the journey. You're still on the pier playing around with the people, the women that you claim are your arch enemies. You're all still on the pier doing the same things you were doing in high school. It's just that some of you guys learn how to be a little bit better at it than the rest of them. But I mean, in the end, it's all the same thing by y'all's definition. But you look down on the omega male, which is the true male. Now, look at the symbol here at the bottom center. Instead of branching off and going your own way and doing your own thing, if you would embrace the omega philosophy, you would actually win completely. Look at the symbol. Instead of branching off and going back to the very thing you claim to be running away from, the true men, the real men, the called out men, the set aside apart men, the true high value men branch off and go the way of the omega. There's a precept there under the omega. That's the route they chose to go, instead of just doing their own thing, which is what everybody else is doing, some better at it than others, by y'all's definition. And then if you look to the right, there's another precept there. Read those two precepts and really do some deep meditation on those and some deep soul searching on those, and determine if this is your reason for adopting the MGTOW philosophy into your life. Because if you want to do it the way that it's been sold to the public, then you're no better off than everybody else. Okay? So instead of the acronym MGTOW, men going their own way, why not do it this way? Men going the omega way. Because in the end, at the end of the day, that man is the one that's going to achieve the true prize that was intended when this philosophy was first introduced into society. Everybody else came up with this other alternative false narrative, and they're all going to suffer the same self-destructive punishments, as, their counterparts, the feminists. You're all going down that broad path that leads to destruction. But because narrow is the path and straight is the way that leads to true success and true life, you're only going to find very few that take this path that's represented down at the bottom center of this screenshot. Okay? All of you guys are competing for sex. All of you, except the omega male. And even among the omega males, if they don't do it according to this sign at the bottom center, they're doomed just as well. All right? I'm going to give you a few examples, historical examples of true omega males. The first and foremost was the last Adam, Christ, Hamashiach. He was the one that paved the way of the true omega male. John the Baptist, that came a little around about the same time he did. The Apostle Paul. And there were a few others that were unnamed, but not just in scripture, but in secular history, you have many omega males that didn't get the publicity that they should have gotten. The 144,000 men of Israel, the first fruits of Israel, all omega males. These are the males that the Most High highly esteemed. These are the males that the Most High consider high value males, because that which is highly esteemed among men is an abomination to the Most High. But here's my question. Who are you trying to impress? Yourself and other people, or the Most High? Because whatever the answer to that question is determines the brand of MGTOW that you have embraced. And so at the end of it all, you're going to get the rewards, the true rewards of that brand of MGTOW. All right? And so that concludes this public service announcement for those to whom it may concern. I know the majority of which aren't going to accept this. This is already well known. But to those that are called, this was for you and for you alone. Peace.